Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Watts Alive here on Channel 95, taped at Bristol Community College. And we're starting the program today with a longtime friend.
Yes.
I like that better than the option of old, you know. Longtime friend.
Time.
Yeah, it is. We worked together at the Standard Times many years ago, and Maureen is a wonderful, wonderful writer and reporter, journalist. And one of your assignments, I believe, with not alone, you weren't, they certainly had a team working on it, but was the highway killings, the famous, very famous highway killings in the 1980s, and actually that became an international story at that time. And you've written a new book called, if you want to hold it up for a sec, Shallow Graves, about those days and those times, and the poor souls whose bodies were found, you know, primarily along Route 195 between Fall River and New Bedford. So tell us how you got involved in the case. Why don't you go back to the 1980s and why you, although I know you did a lot of crime stuff at the time, but.
In 1988, prior to that, I'd been doing a lot of stories about drug addiction, about prostitutes on the street, about drug addicts and some of the problems that they faced. And I found out that a number of the women, drug-addicted women on the street, were being assaulted by men that were picking them up.
As prostitutes.
As prostitutes,
right,
yes.
Yeah.
Right around that time, a number of women went missing, very, very slowly, not all at once so that people would take notice. They started going missing in April, March, April, May, maybe in June, July, and August. People began, a particular detective, John Dextrader in New Bedford PD, began noticing a correlation between the
a pattern.
A pattern there. Plus, in July, 2 bodies of women were found on the highways. One on 140 in Freetown, one on 195 in Dartmouth. Then a 3rd body was found by a state highway cleanup crew.
And this was of these women were the same that had been noted as missing?
No one knew who they were. They had not been identified.
Okay.
So here the police department had a list of missing women. They were noticing that there were now 3 bodies of women on the highways, all unidentified. None of the women were found in New Bedford, of course. So it really wasn't a New Bedford case. After the 3rd body was found, the state police and the DA's office brought in specially trained cadaver dogs. These are dogs that are specially trained to find human remains. And a couple of days after the 3rd body was found, a search dog found a 4th body, then a 5th body.
Wow.
And in the course of less than a year, 9 bodies were found. All outside of New Bedford, 195, 140, and Route 88.
Was it thought at the time, because there was a section of New Bedford at that time that was well known as a Wells Square area, that was well known for solicitation, prostitution. Were they coming out of that area? Were they ever identified as coming out of that area of New Bedford? Or?
Not all of them. All of the women, the common denominator is they were all drug addicts. Many of them were on the street soliciting, selling themselves, but that was primarily just to fund their drug habit. Some of them disappeared in the South End. Some of them disappeared near the bus area.
Young? Were they all young women?
The age ranged from 19 to mid-30s. Most of them were about 5'1", very, very thin. All but of the 11 women who were reported missing, all but 1 was white.
And so how did
how did I get involved?
Yeah, how did the assignments go there? With the editor and so forth. It was Ragsdale at that time, Jim Ragsdale?
It was Jim Ragsdale.
Yeah.
However, it wasn't like, oh, you are assigned to covering this story.
Right.
I was a bit of a pain as a reporter at that time. I would find stories and I would just do them. And that's what happened in this case. A detective made mention to me that, I'm noticing there's a lot of missing women. I checked the missing persons reports, confirmed. Here you have this cluster of missing women.
Right.
You have at least 2 bodies found. Is there a correlation? And then it just exploded after that.
Right, yeah. So was the total 11 at the end of
At
everything?
the end, there are 11 suspected victims. But there could be even more out there that we don't even know about.
Now, was it thought then that, and I guess we could then
Yeah.
go to now, was it thought then that this was a serial type of killing, that perhaps it was one person responsible for the
Yes.
The deaths,
yes.
yeah.
But there was a real reluctance at the time by officials to admit, yes, it's a serial killer.
very scary
They're
thing.
very scary, and also, I suspect there was also a lot of pressure from the business leaders. I mean, who wants to be
That,
known
right.
as, oh, this is a city where there's a serial killer.
killing, exactly, yeah.
And I think that may have hampered things a little bit because people weren't, at least people high up weren't willing to say, let's put all of our resources
Efforts
in here.
into it, right.
Yeah.
Well, that happens a lot. You
Yeah.
know, you look back at the Watergate, and
Yeah.
it was the same thing. I mean, there was 2 guys who were kind of out there.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't totally on their own. They did get some backing at the paper, the Washington Post, but they were out there kind of, sifting through until it all
Yeah.
finally started to come together.
Yeah. And-
Okay, so let's jump now to today.
Yeah, almost 30 years. Almost 30 years later.
Right, exactly.
About a few years ago, I've been trying to do this book for a number of years, and it never quite seemed
Well, it's
right.
a natural.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It never quite seemed the right time. And part of it was I kept on hoping that there'd be a solution to it. That, okay, once they find who the killer
Somebody,
is,
right.
there's a resolution. But about 4 years ago, I realized that just wasn't going to happen. And I did have some notes and work already done on it, and just started the
To pull it
project up
together.
again. Yeah.
Did that surprise you, Maureen, back then, and of course now too, that person never really was found?
I was very
they couldn't
surprised.
pin it on somebody.
Yeah, I was very, very surprised. I was really hopeful throughout the entire investigation that they would have caught someone. They would have identified the real killer.
Right, right.
They
And
may,
then
they may not have been able to prosecute the person, but they would have been able to say, this is the person
This
who
is the
did
person who did it, yeah. And they, ironically too, they never, they stopped at that particular time, or it seems they did.
Seems to have stopped,
It
yeah.
seems they did, yeah, because of course there's always the potential that whoever it was, if that person left the area, could have
Yeah.
done damage elsewhere, and who would know, unless you really somehow connected that. And
There was a very strong feeling that the person was local, that they were familiar with the area, familiar with the roads.
how to make things
to-
happen
yeah.
there with disappearing bodies and everything, yeah.
So there was a really strong feeling amongst the investigators that they were talking about and looking for someone who was very, very local.
And that must have been a real challenge to them, to the fact that, they really had to kind of, I don't know if these things, according to the TV shows now that we watch, I don't know if they're ever fully put to bed, these cases.
No,
they
and-
always talk about them.
And that's interesting that you bring up, when you watch TV today, it seems so easy for them to identify the killer, but in 1988, it was really, really much more difficult.
And no one has ever...
DNA was just starting
Yeah,
out.
right.
There weren't surveillance cameras. People didn't have cell phones. Things were not computerized. Fingerprints, computerized fingerprinting in the state was just beginning.
But no one went back to it, in these, let's say, these intervening 30 years. No one ever went back, at cold cases, I guess
Yeah.
is what they're called, and looked to say, maybe we should take a look again.
Well,
Based on all this other stuff, the
Well-
DNA and everything else.
Well, over the course of the last 30 years, quietly, district attorneys' offices had gone back and retested some of the evidence, but
nothing
nothing
materialized.
materialized to identify the killer.
Well, hopefully you've got a book that could
Yeah.
become a film, I think. don't you? It's got all
we'll
the,
see.
it's got all
We'll
the,
see.
you know, if
Yeah.
I mean, if things work out, it's
Yeah.
got all the ingredients there to become not only a best-selling novel, but a
Well,
hit movie.
We'll see.
Well, let's hope.
Well,
Yeah,
I also
really.
hope that whoever killed these women, the book will, renew interest in it, and someone will come forward and say, yes, this is the person who did it.
Somebody obviously somebody knows something, whether or not they're all still living, who knows, but
Yeah.
yeah, usually there's somebody within an area that
Yeah, they know.
knows more than they ever
Yeah.
said. Right, yeah, they saw something, they know something, they're related to somebody where information slipped out, but something
Yeah.
happened.
And
Yeah.
they were too afraid before to say something,
And now
but now,
yeah.
the
So
person
what are you doing with yourself apart from
But aside from writing
this
this?
wonderful piece? We'll hold it up again. Everyone can
Yeah,
see
it's a
it.
long title. It's
'cause
Shallow
it does
Graves,
mention,
The
right.
Hunt for the New Bedford Highway,
Highway serial killer. And what are you doing?
What am I doing right now?
No, yes, in
Oh,
your life.
in my
Yes,
life,
apart
in my
from the
life, right
book,
now.
Yeah, knowing that we have the book.
Yes. Right now, I am the director of the journalism program at Stonehill College,
Right.
teaching new students,
How to do it.
and a whole new generation how to do
and
this.
a whole new way of doing it
Yes,
too, isn't it?
yes, yeah. They're tweeting and
Yeah.
shooting video and
It's
writing
all
for the
out there.
web.
Yeah.
Yes.
As we see.
Yeah.
Even at our political level. Who
Yes.
would have ever thunk, as they say, back there 20 or 30 years ago?
Yes. It is a whole different world.
And you've come a long way and done a lot. And when did you actually kind of segue into education from journalism itself?
When I was at the Brockton Enterprise, after I left the Standard Times in New
Times.
Bedford, I went to the Enterprise in Brockton.
And now they're all owned by the
They're
same
all-
people, so it's the same.
The same
You could work at
company.
any one of them
Yeah.
and you'd be in the same place, more or less.
And while I was up there, I was teaching part-time at Stonehill, teaching journalism, and then there was an opening for a full-time position when the previous director
Right.
retired. So
Well, it's a
There I
nice
am.
segue in, and I feel that way about my own teaching here at BCC, that you are able to share with young minds the things you've learned along the way. And there are many of them,
Yeah.
actually.
yep. And students are absolutely wonderful.
Oh, they are, yeah.
It's so much
Eager
fun.
minds
Yes.
ready to pick it up. So again, everyone, this will be on sale. Program airs in September, so this will be on sale as of September the 5th.
Yes.
Shallow Graves, Maureen Boyle.
And I'm having a book signing September 7th at the Country Club of New
New
Bedford,
Bedford, yeah.
at 4:30.
Great. So Maureen is looking forward to all of
Yep.
you being there.
Yes.
And there are some photos in here. Yes, there
Yes.
are.
Most of the photos are from the Standard Times. They were gracious in allowing me to use it.
Use them, right.
The cover photo was taken by Jack Eden from one of the scenes.
Long time
long
Standard
time
Times
Standard
photographer.
Time, yes.
Nice guy. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming.
Well, thanks so much for
It was-
having
it
me
was
on.
a
It was
pleasure.
wonderful.
And we'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, to Arts Alive here on Channel 95, Bristol Community College. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Kathy Florsheim, who is an artist showing at the wonderful gallery here at Bristol Community College. So tell us a little bit about what you do, Kathy, what kind of work.
The work that I'm going to be showing is from a series called Room 10, which started in Room 10 at an inn, which will remain my secret.
Okay.
It's
That's a good way to start.
well, it's on the Cape, and I was interested in trying to see if I could obscure the horizon line, because over a period of time I got really fed up with looking at seascapes and thought if I have to look at another one, I'm going to be over the edge.
Yeah.
And then realized how many there were in my house and realized, better reconsider this. So I shot some foggy stuff. I really didn't think much about it in 2011 and didn't look at the photographs, the proofs, until 6 months later. Realized that something was going on and went back and started to get serious about the series. And
Wow, good.
most of that series has been shot on the Cape, and it's long and it's large and it's continuing.
And that will be on, the
will.
exhibit opens on,
September 7th,
right.
6 to 8, and there are 50 photographs in the show.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is, but this is a huge series. There are probably easily 5 or 6 times that many prints that exist. And that's culled from a whole lot of film for the last 6 years.
And how did you get started in photography? What?
Oh, accidentally. I took a class when I was a senior in college because I was looking for a gut course, and it turned into my life.
Isn't that
Which
interesting?
is not what I expected. Actually, it started as a junior. I was a history major, and I didn't want to spend my life in the library, so I took a studio art class. I didn't know anything about studio art, and I ended up finding out that that really was where I wanted to spend my life. And then I went to art school in California for 2 years, and I took a class thinking, I don't know anything about this camera that I own. My parents had given me a camera for my 22nd birthday. And the class was way too large, and the instructor went around the room and asked why everybody was there, and I said, because I have to be, and she let me stay. And that was 1970.
That was an honest answer.
It was true.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. And I came out of there and went to RISD for graduate school
Great school.
and spent 2 years working with Aaron Siskin and Harry Callahan, who were my mentors and sometimes friend. It's not always easy to be friends with somebody that you work with.
And of course, you developed your particular. I'm looking for the right word. Specialty maybe is the right word within
yes.
that realm of photography and so forth.
Yes, but accidentally.
Well, you mentioned seascapes. That's why I'm going to that place, and that you had a lot of them, and then you began to look at another form of.
Well, they came last. I started.
okay.
I have had family in Provincetown. My aunt and uncle lived in town, and I still go there. And I don't call it P-town; I call it town.
Town, yeah.
And we had a cottage, and I visited them pretty regularly. And I started photographing there, probably 1973, at the latest 1974. So water has always been part of my understanding of life and what I wanted to explore. And I was using infrared film and Polaroid for a number of years, and it just happened. It's not something I planned. I think
Well, many times I find that things do just happen. You almost like fall into something, and you didn't really plan it to be that way. But like I will tell people that everything I've ever studied, I've used. And that's a variety of different things, you know, throughout my life that I have. But I've always found a use for it in my life and in my career. So it's an interesting thing how that kind of just works. If you let it happen, I think, it kind of works out.
That's true, and it worked its way into me in a way I could never have foreseen, because at the time I was also doing, trying to do magazine work in color and black and white, and I photographed the fishing industry domestically, and some boat building and sailing. And
Were you in New Bedford at all for that? Any of that?
I was at Thurston Sail they were in Warren, and I went out of Point Judith once with a day fishing crew, which was very interesting, and I photographed shad fishing on the Hudson River, and over time couldn't find a way into getting published, and pretty much gave up until a lot later. I had an artist residency in 2002, at the Atlantic Center for the Arts in New Smyrna Beach, Florida.
Florida, yeah.
And the proposal that I came to the residency with was to photograph the beach there, and I did not like the beach in Daytona because it's where people drive their cars, and that's not what I thought.
Oh no, I know. I
beaches
was
were
there.
for.
Yeah.
And I was watching also a proliferation of very large buildings overtaking community-size, 2-3-story character buildings with a lot of character. And I photographed it, and at the end of the residency realized I was looking at a land use problem. And when I came home, a friend of mine, a colleague actually, said, why don't you specialize on the coastline? That was 2003. So I began photographing land use in New England, in Maine, and Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, places that I knew, and trying to figure out how the land was being appropriated. And that series is called On the Edge. And a friend of mine in Rhode Island asked me if I had ever been to Roy Carpenter's Beach, which is a summer community in Matunic. And I hadn't. I did not grow up as a Rhode Islander. I grew up in Illinois. And I went there in 2005, and I couldn't figure out why I was there. It's a collection of cottages that were, at least at that time in my thinking, not very interesting. However, the next year, the coastline was getting beaten up pretty badly, and the media was carrying a lot of photographs of what was going on at Royce. So I found myself back down there, and the rest is history. I've been photographing there steadily since 2005, and I have a very long history of what that coastline looks like. And in the meanwhile, I became a senior fellow at the Coastal Institute at the University of Rhode Island,
Great, that's wonderful.
the Graduate School of Oceanography, and I know a lot of the scientists who work there and the issues also, and I've spent a lot of time and continue to be interested in and work on how climate change is affecting us here.
I was going to say how, you know, how timely all that is, really ironically, that
Yeah.
you were sort of watching. I'm sure I was going to ask you that, but it sounds like that was the case. This, you know, within that sort of ebb and flow of the tide, that
Literally.
encroaching into the into the land
Well,
and the
that-
properties. I would at some
Yes.
point in time, yeah.
Some places are accreting and some are losing. Royce has lost 200 feet of seafront, waterfront since 1939, and the last 100 feet since 2006. So
For
it's,
those who don't believe,
well, I don't think it's a matter of believing.
No.
It's factual, and they can take it or leave it. It's
Right.
still happening.
yeah.
Other parts of Rhode Island are picking up sand. Further south along the coast, there's more sand that's being swept,
Deposited.
deposited there. Yeah. The Cape is very badly affected on the ocean side, not so much yet on the bay side. Really depends on location and where the storms are coming from. And I fell over this. I didn't set out to do it.
But it's
really,
yeah. I would
uh,
think so interesting, and to be almost a documentarian of the of a lot of this.
It
through
is documentary
what you're
work.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't express an opinion. I talk to the residents. I'm practically part of the community because I'm there a lot. I'm often asked, are you going to buy a house here? And my answer is no, because I know too much about the projections. And it doesn't take very long to look up the inundation patterns, and they're not particularly favorable. So New England is getting the worst of climate change. The Gulf of Maine has the fastest rising temperature of 99% of the bodies of water in this world. So we are in the catbird seat in a very awful way. Not something that I'm celebrating,
Happy
but
about, right.
watching.
Of course not, yeah.
Yeah, and what I'm doing in the gallery, the Seascape series, Room 10, is really an outgrowth of spending a lot of time in the water, and I don't know how it happened. It just happened. It just came out of what I'm doing.
But
Otherwise-
obviously something very interesting to see.
I hope so.
And no, I'm sure of it, yeah. I think we might have some, either on a stick or perhaps slides of your work that I hope we're able to drop into this interview so that people who, for whatever reason, might not be able to make it into the gallery,
Some of
they
that
would be able to, to get an idea of some of the work that you do.
Some of that work is on my website.
Oh, great.
It's under the project heading called Room 10. There are 16 photographs which are in a grid, and if you hover or double click on the image, you'll be able to enlarge it and get the title and the, I think it's just the title. I don't remember if I put the year in.
And on the edge is the title?
No, it's Room 10.
Oh, Room 10, that's right. Yeah,
On
can't
the
forget
edge
that.
is
Yeah.
the coastline. They're
Right.
all related, so you can have a day at the beach on my website.
Yeah, and once again, the opening of Kathy's exhibit is September the 7th here at Bristol Community College. They normally do that. I'm assuming it's a Thursday.
It is.
Normally, these openings are at on Thursday rather, at the Goodowitz Gallery here, and which is a lovely, lovely
beautiful.
gallery. It's a small gallery, and it is beautiful. It's a perfect space,
It
and
is.
Kathleen does a wonderful job. I think I always try to mention that because she works so hard behind the scenes,
She
to
does.
make all this happen. And now through the years, I've had a number of lovely people like yourself on either radio or TV to talk about what they do, and it's something that I love. So I thank you for being with us. I hope we have a good turnout.
I do
on,
too.
On the 7th and throughout these. It ends when?
October 12th.
Yeah, it's more or less like a 5-week.
It is.
Give or take, right? Yeah.
I hope that
So we hope that you'll turn out and see this great exhibit of Kathy's work, Kathy Florsheim, right here at the Grimshaw Gudowitz Gallery at Bristol Community College.